Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hello, and thanks once again for joining us for today's show. On the satellite imagery from yesterday, we had a band of moisture moving onto the North Gulf Coast that brought the rain and snow showers in across the area back to the east there toward Yakutat, and a lot of shower activity moving through the southeast coast. And then the outer edge of the next storm system that was rolling northward and developing over the northeast Pacific. Out to the west, you can see the next frontal boundary out, and here quite clearly the back edge right there as it was pushing east-northeastward into the central Aleutians. And then a lot of kind of an upper level system here over the northeast brought some areas of light snow from the White Mountains north to the Arctic coast. Today that's still there, not quite as wound up as it was, but there were some areas of light snow, isolated snow showers extending from, actually the Alaska Range all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. A pretty good shower here, pretty area of showers. Get that rolling, developing. Brought heavy snow this afternoon at Northway. They were down to a quarter mile at 3 o'clock in heavy snow. Since it's improved, and that seemed to be sliding off to the south-southwest toward Nebezna and the Slana areas. Otherwise, you can see the low pressure area developing and tracking northward farther to the east than I thought it was going to yesterday. I thought it'd track up just off the coast here and make landfall somewhere around Port Alexander, but much farther over to the east. So you didn't get the heavy wind and rain that you would have otherwise gotten if it had tracked farther to the west on up to the north. But it did bring some wind and a little bit of rain and snow into the area there. But this system out here to the west bringing good east and southeast and east winds gusting over 50 miles an hour to the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians today with rain and snow back into more of a northerly gusty wind pattern over the central Aleutians. And quite an area of clearing here west of Fairbanks from Galena up to Hughes and down into the Kuskokwim Valley. Seeing some sunshine today as well as a fair amount of sun over southern Alaska. On the chart today, there's that low tracking northward there as it comes across Dixon Entrance. Some rain and snow spreading up, but really not all that heavy going on. There was some snow showers, rain and snow showers at Kodiak earlier today. And again, isolated snow showers along the Alaska Range, and those are scattered up the eastern interior. A little heavier right in this area, as I mentioned, as that moved in toward the Tok and Northway area. Then a band of light snow or flurries there, again isolated with some fog from the lower Yukon Valley all the way up to the western Arctic coast. Then some snow showers scattered across the eastern Arctic coast there from the eastern Brooks Range. And that front right in this position, the low now taking more of a turn to the north, or a little turn to the northeast, and should spread wind and rain into Kodiak Island. In fact, Kodiak expecting after midnight snow and blowing snow to begin. Could pick up 2 inches of snow before it changes over to rain late tonight, early tomorrow morning. Lingering, isolated showers here, mostly in the Gulf of Alaska, so staying fair here over southern Alaska, and then these hit and miss snow showers here along the eastern interior from Alaska Range all the way up again to the Arctic coast, but not too bad, just some variable clouds and light winds over the west central interior. Not too bad even out along the coastline there, but the stronger winds blowing in from the north and northeast across eastern Aleutians. Look for gusts 50 to possibly 60 miles per hour. Gale warnings out from the central Aleutians back to the east, again spreading into Kodiak Island. And this low now off into Canada, so I'd look for a decrease in the wind and rain that's going on over the southern panhandle and an increase in the clearing as higher pressure temporarily builds in as this frontal system advances to the east-northeast. And then tomorrow afternoon, gales back along the coast there. Storm warnings here from the North Gulf Coast, and that'll extend in across the Barren Islands, possibly Kamishak Bay. But the wind and rain diminishing once that front gets north of Kodiak there. Winds will turn south-southwest and come down considerably from the stronger east-northeasterly speeds you'll see later tonight and early tomorrow morning. Strong northerlies here across the Alaska Peninsula, blowing those snow showers again southward into the Fox Islands and the western part of the Alaska Peninsula. Look for a few snow showers even around the Pribilofs. Winds not too bad, but they'll be coming down in the afternoon. High pressure back out to the west, just some scattered leftover moisture out in that area with light winds. Then for Wednesday, next system here sliding south of the western Aleutians. So that'll probably bring some rain and snow to the Shemya area. Otherwise, high pressure in over the central areas, light winds, possibly some sunshine from Nikolsky back over to Adak and Atka. Even the Pribilofs might clear out a little bit. This snow shower activity may stay up to the north there, far enough to allow some of that clearing to work in. And definitely north winds here clearing off the coast there. Togiak Bay to Dillingham looks pretty good. Not too bad at King Salmon either. Just some clouds, but front northward and eastward quite rapidly. Another trough swings up and brings moderate showers to the southern and northern southeast coast, or just flat out rain. Rain extending back along the North Gulf Coast into the Prince William Sound area, western Cook Inlet, and there'll be of a mixed precipitation at the higher elevations and depending on the time of day. And temperatures, speaking of temperatures, mid-40s for the most part here over the Panhandle, 47 at Skagway, with 45 in Juneau, 43 at Sitka, same thing down at Klawock, and 46 at Metlakatla. Stewart had that same reading as well. 40 degrees at Yakutat, 39 Cordova. Valdez at the airport up to 37, 40 degrees in Anchorage with a 39 down at Homer, 38 Kodiak, 39 there at Talkeetna. And the Copper River Basin, temperatures in the mid-30s with heavy snow, Northway at 29 degrees, but no snow, and 42 up at Eagle. Fairbanks, 37, about the same at Delta. And farther to the north, 36 at Fort Yukon, but Arctic Village at 23, just 9 at Anatuvik. And that same temperature reported over at Kaktovik, 0 there at Dead Horse, 5 above at Fairbanks, at Barrow, 5 below at Atasuk, and 4 at Wainwright. Single numbers all the way down the coastline, but Point Hope did reach 10 above, back to 8, and a little bit of flurry conditions there around Kotzebue today. 2 at Deering and 7 over at Ambler. And down along the Seward Peninsula, Nome checked in with 11 degrees, 7 at Tin City, and 18 there at Gamble. And kind of a chilly day here along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Temperatures running 10 to 15 degrees. 34 though at McGrath, with 32 at Sleepmute, 24 down at Bethel, and upper 20s there for the Pribilofs. Lower to mid-30s here for the Aleutians, coldest out to the west there at Shemya, and 34 in Unalaska, 34 at Sand Point, and 34 also at King Salmon. And the lows tonight dropping into the 25 to 30 degree range there across Bristol Bay. Otherwise along the Arctic coast, anywhere from 0 to 5 below or 10 below here over the western areas, above 0 toward Kaktovik, and in the teens over the Yukon Valley, teens to mid-20s for the 40-mile country, Tanana Valley, the Koyukuk Valley, a little chillier, 4 to 11 degrees there, and south of the mountains of the Alaska Range, mid to upper 20s, and mid-20s or mid-30s to near 40 over the southern southeast coast, and lower 30s out here for the Aleutians, upper teens for the Pribilofs. Highs for tomorrow, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, and mid to upper 30s here for the Aleutians, upper 30s to near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, and 45 to 50 about sums it up here for the areas of south central Alaska. Not too bad in the Tanana Valley as well, upper 30s to lower, possibly mid-40s, and mid-40s here across all of the southeast coast. Flying weather shows IFR, Kodiak Island. They'll be moving into the area around midnight and after, and then all along the coastline into the northern southeast coast there. That'll be tending to advance eastward with the other system pulling out. So it'll be a period of VFR in between the two. Good VFR through the interior, all the way out to the coast and beyond. Some marginal VFR for, say, Tin City and Teller, as well as St. Lawrence Island. Lowest conditions along the Arctic coast will be on the eastern areas, central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. Could see some possible IFR, more likely though marginal with VFR on the west side. And then with those gusty north winds, look for IFR on the lee side of the windward side of the Alaska Peninsula here. Marginal VFR for the eastern Aleutians, a break with high pressure, and then more marginal VFR spreading in to the Shemya area. Passes Anatuvik looks open on both entrances tomorrow and through the pass. So does Adigan, same forecast, good VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR tomorrow, rainy VFR, windy VFR. Isabel and Mentasta both could start out marginal and then become VFR late in the morning to the early afternoon hours at the latest. And for Tanita, VFR the entire day on both entrances. Portage, though, west entrance VFR, possibly becoming marginal VFR here on the east entrance during the afternoon hours. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels 2,000 feet up to the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Again, that'll be late tonight, and so the snow should rapidly change over to rain again toward morning, and also 2,000 feet up the coastal areas of the Panhandle at the surface, hugging the coastline again, and then a little north of the Aleutians out here across the Bering Sea. Looking at icing, really no icing to speak of out here. The next batch with that storm farther out to the west there. Otherwise, look for occasional widespread moderate rime icing here along in advance of the frontal boundary into the Kenai Peninsula, with icing chances increasing here along the southeast coast throughout the day, and this edging a little to the north past the coastline, but not too far to the north. All that wrapping back into Kodiak Island, and then some mixed icing conditions along the Alaska Peninsula to possibly the eastern Aleutians. Winds aloft showing the jet stream southwest 140 knots. That's going to carry that low center right up into the Gulf of Alaska on Wednesday. Then beyond that, it sort of pulls back to the northwest and fills over Cook Inlet. So that's going to keep an unsettled weather pattern here across southern Alaska for the next several days, probably to the end of the week. 9,000 foot winds show southerlies 55 knots out of the east along the North Gulf Coast, 45 knot easterlies there for Kodiak Island. Much lighter as you get north of the coastline there, just 10 to 20 across the Susitna Valley and Alaska Range. Even lighter east-southeast winds here to the north, just 5 to 10 knots and 5 to 10 knots along the Arctic coast, and then getting a little brisk again along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians with those northwest wind speeds at 30 to 40 knots, lighter winds out toward the area of high pressure farther to the west. 3,000 feet, about the same pattern here, strongest still eastern Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula. Then these easterly winds here, the front right in that position, 50 to 55 knots there in advance of the front, 40 knots coming across the Aleutian Range there into Bristol Bay. Again, pretty light up over the interior by comparison, just 5 to 15 knots. And those winds here, again, supporting the gales tomorrow afternoon, picking up along the southern Panhandle. And for turbulence, could be some severe, especially for smaller aircraft here, where those stronger winds in advance of the front are along across the Gulf of Alaska, back in across Kodiak Island. Late tonight, they'll be lifting northward tomorrow again with the front swinging through. Lighter winds, less turbulence behind it, but moderate chop all along the Alaska Peninsula, the Fox Islands, areas of moderate chop here, Nunivak Island, Kilburg Mountains and those areas, but staying near the coastline, not really making too much northward advance, more of an easterly push to that front. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening, our guest is Tony Breeze. Tony is a well-respected ANP who's in charge of maintenance planning for Pan Air and their care coordinator. She started out her aviation career as an ANP, apprentice in Homer, came to Anchorage and Pan Air in 2012. Tony, welcome to Hangar Flying.
Thank you.
Tony, my first question is how and when did you first get interested in the aircraft maintenance career field?
I bounced around with the idea for many, many years through another career. And when I moved back to Alaska in 2009, I went back and forth with my dad, talked about it, and decided that was the route I needed to go, tight-knit aviation group. And that's what I needed to finally pursue.
Well, I've got to tell you, I think you're a great example of how women can succeed in all fields of aviation, including turning wrenches.
Thank you.
You and I talked about this, but I think it's kind of fascinating. I think you've got some thoughts on how women might even be better prepared than men in some areas. In maintenance.
Sometimes.
Talk about that.
I think that when it comes to building things or fabrication, building hoses, anything that's kind of crafty, you might say, I think that we tend to excel at it in being very specific in how we do it.
And one of the things that obvious to me is you probably have smaller hands and probably able to get into tighter spaces.
Very much so. It's been commented on many times.
Any disadvantages?
Sometimes just being a woman can be a disadvantage. There are still some old school people out there, and that can cause some hardships at times. Sometimes things are really heavy, and you have to figure out ways around that and getting some help or crafting some way to lift something up.
But working as a team probably is good for anybody, regardless of gender.
Absolutely. When I started out, I couldn't lift certain things, and a few years into it, I was throwing them into planes with ease.
I mentioned to you earlier, I really think you're a role model. And I think, you know, our viewers, particularly out in Bush, Alaska, a lot of people interested in aviation careers. And I suspect there's some young women out there, women in general out there, looking at you say, you know what, I've always thought about that. Can you talk a little bit about the career and what someone might do that wants to be a mechanic?
There are a couple different methods. I was an apprentice. That's what worked for me at that time in my life, to work full-time. And I think that you'll benefit from being an apprentice or going to school, and they both have a lot of potential, and you just have to push through with it and do what feels right.
So talk a little bit about the apprentice program. How does someone become an apprentice?
A lot of times it's with 135 operators, and they'll post within their company, they'll post with the Department of Labor in different situations like that. But then the 121 operators also, they post for helpers, shop helpers, not specifically calling it apprentice, but then after 2.5 to 3 years of work, they do require you to get your AMP and make sure you go through with the testing.
So to begin at the beginning, are there any special traits or knowledge or requirements to qualify as an apprentice?
No, mechanically savvy. You want to have that, just be knowledgeable in maintenance, I believe. And that was something that was natural to me. I grew up under the hood of cars with my dad.
Well, I bet your dad and mom are very proud of you getting your A&P.
They are.
I want to have you back and talk a little bit more about the care team.
Yes.
Which you're the coordinator of, and I know you feel very passionate about it. But before we leave the first topic, any thoughts that you'd like to share with the folks out there about being around aviation, living in Alaska, being a woman mechanic? What comes to mind?
That the aviation community in Alaska is one of the tightest knit groups I've ever been a part of. I'm very proud of that. And I think that if you have a passion for something like that, even if it's later in life and not right out of high school, that you pursue it, because it's really worth it.
Well, I know there's folks out in the audience that sure glad to hear you say that.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the program tonight.
It's my pleasure.
We'll get you on next time and talk about the care team. I think folks will really appreciate your enthusiasm for it, and also a little better understanding what you actually do.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. I would remind you that Hangar Flying is brought to you by Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, which is completely member funded. And the only way we get funding, we don't have any grants, it's by membership. Individual membership is $35 a year, and it enables us to bring programs like this to you. We have a quarterly safety newsletter. We have 2 safety seminars a year. One's coming up April 25th in Anchorage. It's the float seminar. We give 3 scholarships. really encourage you to join if you haven't, and renew for 2015 if you've been a member in the past. Just go to our website, aasfonline.org. And until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, tomorrow afternoon, gale force winds come back to the coastline here, south 40 knots, southeasterlies 40 to 45 knots along the north coast, and southeasterly gales to Clarence Strait there, and small craft advisories for the remainder of the areas up to the north through northern Lynn Canal, south winds 25 with seas running 5 to as high as 7 feet. And then for Wednesday, got some southwest gales here for the south coast with 24-foot seas, southwest 30 knots, 24-foot seas there for the central and or Cape Edgecombe down to Cape Decision. North of there, southerlies for the north coast, southerly small craft advisories 25 to 30 knots, those seas running 20 to 22 feet. Northern Lynn Canal, south winds 25 knots with 5-foot seas. That same forecast here for Stevens Passage down to Frederick Sound, and then southeast 30 there for the southern inner channels with 6-foot seas. For the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, look for be a narrow band of storm force winds ahead of that front as it swings northward there. So east 55 knots in the northeast or east-northeast 50 knots there across the Barren Islands, possibly even into Kamishak Bay. A full gale for Shelikof Strait out of the northeast. And then winds coming down in the afternoon to east or southeast at 20 knots there for the east side of Kodiak Island, with the front moving northward into about this position. It'll be stronger earlier in the day. And then for Wednesday, northwesterlies, small craft advisories 25 to 30 knots across Kodiak Island. Northwest, possibly as high as 30 knots for a period of time on Wednesday there for Kamishak Bay. Northwest gales here for the Barren Islands, and then easterlies at 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast, a little lighter here for the western portion. Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 20, and Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, looking at about 15 knots. Otherwise, south of the Forelands, 20 knots with 5-foot seas. And for Bristol Bay, northeast gales tomorrow, seas up to 7 feet. Northerly gales here with 14-foot seas on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Northwest 40 with seas up to 17 feet there on the Pacific side of the peninsula. And the strongest winds, almost storm force, northeasterlies 45 knots with 20-foot seas from the area from Sitkinak over to, say, Ochignik or Sand Point. And then for Wednesday, gales continue here over the water southwest of Kodiak Island, especially early in the day. It could drop down below that in the afternoon. Otherwise, northwesterlies 30 knots here across the Alaska Peninsula with seas running 9 to 13 feet. And for Bristol Bay, northwest 25 with 5-foot seas. Out in the Aleutians, lightest here through the west central areas, west at 15. Northwesterlies 25 to 30 knots across Adak and Atka, Nikolsky, and a gale here 30 to 35 knot northwesterlies across Unalaska Island. And back to the west, southwest to 20 with 7-foot seas here for the far western zone. Then on Wednesday, easterlies at 30 knots, southerlies 20 knots for Adak and Atka, and then much lighter on the winds here, just 10 to 20 knots from the west and northwest across the Fox Islands, and winds about 30 knots here with that next low center kind of sliding eastward to the south, so east to northeast to 20 out towards Shemya. And for the southwest coast, look for northerlies at 20 knots with ice-covered seas here for the area north of Nunivak Island. North 25 with 5-foot seas to the south, and then northwesterlies at 25 knots with seas at about 7 feet for the Perbilofs. Lighter winds here for the northern Bering Sea, and northerlies at 15 for St. Lawrence Island. And that holds through Wednesday as well, with north about 20, picking up a little bit here north of Nunivak Island, and then northwesterlies at 25 knots there with 5-foot seas south of the island. Light variable winds here for the northern Bering Sea under high pressure. High pressure ridge kind of edging its way eastward. Westerlies at 15 for the Perbilofs. And then for the Arctic coast there on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds here east at 10 knots all the way over to Demarcation Point. Call it 15 knots for the central coast, and then easterlies at 10 on the west side, and that kind of just follows the arrows around, staying light at about 10 knots from the north from Wales to Cape Thompson. And for Wednesday, the winds pick up a little bit, go 15 knots all along the coastline here. And then from Dead Horse over to Demarcation Point, Barter Island, easterlies at about 20 knots there. And then northwesterlies increasing to 20 knots here from Wells to Cape Thompson. And for tonight, we've got wind and rain here sliding eastward into Kodiak Island. Again, looking for it to start out as snow there at Kodiak with possibly 2 inches of snow and blowing snow before it changes over to rain late tonight or early tomorrow morning, hopefully. And then showers scattering out and conditions improving as that low center takes off to the northeast well into Canada by about 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. Lingering to isolated snow showers along the eastern border areas there, maybe over the White Mountains on up to the eastern Arctic coast, but pretty fair here over a good portion of the west central interior. And then for Tuesday, the next storm system, again bringing gale force winds into the coast along the southeast coast tomorrow afternoon. Possible storm force winds, again in a narrow band ahead of the front as it presses northward there, and that'll kind of circulate right down into Shelikof Strait with lighter winds back toward Kodiak Island, and some hit and miss isolated snow showers of rain or snow over the eastern interior, staying pretty nice out here to the west. Up to the north, not too bad as well. Strong northerly winds on the west side of this low center, bringing snow showers back into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, and then those getting more isolated out towards Adak and Attu. And the outlook for Wednesday, that front pushes well into Canada there and up to the north, just a narrow band of possible light precipitation with it. Really loses its punch as it comes inland, but a pretty strong trough slams the panhandle with moderate to heavy rain showers or just flat out rain that will extend back across Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula. Well, that's a look at the weather. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Coming to Independent Lens.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Hard work and determination. Strong qualities in any teenager.
I have to finish school. That is not a choice.
But when you're homeless, they are essential.
I really want to go to college.
Join Alaska Public Media on Friday, April 17th from 12 to 1 p.m. for a screening of The Homestretch, chat, and conversation about homeless teens. More at alaskapublic.org.